Israel-Hamas war. Israel sends ground forces into Gaza Strip. We're sorry, this feature is currently unavailable. We're working to restore it. Please try again later. The Sydney Morning Herald. The Sydney Morning Herald. Sections. Network. Advertisement. World. Middle East. Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As it happened, Israel-Hamas. Israel sends ground forces into Gaza Strip as war escalates. By Lucy Cormack, Nigel Gladstone and Roy Ward. Save articles for later. Add articles to your saved list and come back to them anytime. Key posts. 8.11 PM Israel's Netanyahu says wasn't shown intel of planned Hamas attack. 7:19 PM, do or die, Israel declares it has begun the next phase in its battle against Hamas. 7:00 PM 2 million people equals 100 trucks, World Food Programme needs more access. 6:41 PM Imam Council calls up government after UN abstention. 5:12 PM Opinion. What would a crushing victory actually look like for Netanyahu? 4:54 PM Palestinian General Delegation expresses disappointment with Australia's UN vote. 3:50 PM, they are not just numbers on paper, thousands rally in Sydney. 3:05 PM ICYMI, Netanyahu opens, second stage, of war. Latest posts. Latest posts. That's all we have for now. That's all we have for you today everyone. Thanks so much for joining us again today, and we plan to have another blog up and running tomorrow morning, so please join us then. We will also have more news overnight as major events arise. Please have a lovely evening and bye for now. I'll finish with a few pics from the separate Israeli and Palestine rallies in Sydney today. A pro-Israeli rally in Sydney on Sunday. Credit, Edwina Pickles. Attendees at the United with Israel rally in Martin Place held placards bearing the names and pictures of Israelis kidnapped by Hamas. Credit, Edwina Pickles. Palestine Action Group Sydney march from Hyde Park North, near the Archibald Fountain, to Belmore Park. Credit, Stephen Seward. Palestine Action Group Sydney march from Hyde Park North, near the Archibald Fountain, to Belmore Park on Sunday. Credit, Stephen Seward. Israel's Netanyahu says wasn't shown intel of planned Hamas attack. Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday took a jab at his intelligence chiefs, saying they never warned him Hamas was planning its wide-scale attack on October 7 and causing a political uproar and a rift within his war cabinet. Netanyahu, who has drawn public ire for not taking responsibility over the intelligence and operational failures surrounding Hamas' rampage through southern Israel, later erased the remarks posted on social media platform X at 1 AM Sunday, about 2300 GMT on Saturday. Thousands attend a pro-Israeli rally in Sydney's Martin Place and march to Circular Quay on Sunday. Credit, Edwina Pickles. While top officials, from the heads of the military and the Shin Bet domestic spy service to his finance minister, have all acknowledged their failures, Netanyahu has not. He has only said that there would be time to ask tough questions, including of himself, after the war. Israel's military spokesperson, asked about Netanyahu's comments during a daily briefing with reporters, declined to respond, saying, "We are now at war, focused on the war." Netanyahu's post had said, "At no time and no stage was a warning given to Prime Minister Netanyahu regarding war intentions of Hamas." On the contrary, all security officials, including the head of Army Intelligence and the head of the Shin Bet, estimated that Hamas was deterred and interested in an arrangement. The remarks were quickly rebuked by current and past allies, including Benny Gantz, a former defense minister who is now in Netanyahu's war cabinet. Gantz said on X, formerly Twitter, that Netanyahu should take back what he said and let the matter go. "When we are at war, leadership must show responsibility, decide to do the right things and bolster the forces in a way that they can carry out what we demand of them," Gantz said. Israel's military spokesperson, asked about Netanyahu's comments during a daily briefing with reporters, declined to respond. The surprise Hamas attack was the deadliest day of Israel's 75-year history. Israel has since bombarded the Gaza Strip with devastating airstrikes and begun ground operations with the aim of toppling the Iran-backed Islamist group and returning scores of captives abducted from Israel to Gaza. I saw his Twitter, the former name for X, from overnight, which points to just one thing: he is not interested in security, he is not interested in hostages, only politics, said opposition lawmaker Avigdor Lieberman, once Netanyahu's defense minister, in a radio interview. Yossi Cohen, who headed the Mossad spy agency under previous Netanyahu governments, told Israel Radio, "You take responsibility from the beginning of your job, not from the middle. When I took responsibility for the Mossad, for example, all that happened, from end to end was my responsibility." Reuters. Hungry Gaza residents break into UN warehouses. Jerusalem. Thousands of Gaza residents broke into warehouses and distribution centers of the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, grabbing flour and basic survival items, the organization said on Sunday. This is a worrying sign that civil order is starting to break down after 3 weeks of war and a tight siege on Gaza, UNRWA said in a statement. Aid supplies to Gaza have been choked since Israel began bombarding the Palestinian enclave in response to a deadly attack by its ruling militant group Hamas. Reuters. Advertisement. Muslim leaders frustrated by UN vote as Labour tensions rise over burp comments. By Paul Sakal and Angus Thompson. The decision to abstain from a UN resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian truce between Israel and Hamas has fueled frustrations with Labour in Australia's Muslim community, according to the Federation of Islamic Councils. Chief Executive Kamali Dabusi said some Muslim leaders were discussing blocking Labour MPs from mosques and community centres over the government's support for Israel. It comes as tensions rise within Labour's caucus over contradictory messaging on the Middle East conflict from senior cabinet ministers. The UN General Assembly vote on a non-binding resolution calling for a humanitarian truce in Gaza on Friday. Credit, app. I am hearing of talk about non-engagement with the government and not welcoming them in our centres, Dabusi said. There is anger in the community and there is talk of questioning the value of engagement. Australia's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, James Larson, said Australia abstained because the resolution failed to recognise Hamas responsibility for the October 7 massacre of 1,400 innocent Israelis. Dabusi said the Muslim community had for many years developed a close relationship with Labour, but the community felt it had been dropped like a hot potato since the outbreak of war. Click here to read the story. Do or die, Israel declares it has begun the next phase in its battle against Hamas. By Matthew Knott. Estero. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his nation's military has begun a new phase in its battle against Hamas, declaring that Israel is fighting a second war for independence in its bid to crush the terror group, while urging his citizens to prepare for a drawn-out conflict. The fractures in the Middle East continued to expand on Sunday, with Israel recalling diplomats from Turkey after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused it of behaving like a war criminal, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi labeling the region a ticking time bomb. Destroyed buildings caused by the ongoing Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City. Credit, AB. Highlighting the new phase of attacks, the Israeli military released grainy images showing tanked columns moving slowly in open areas of Gaza, many apparently near the border. It now appears Israel will conduct a staged escalation on the ground in Gaza, instead of the sudden and overwhelming offensive many had expected. Israeli airstrikes hit areas around Gaza's largest hospital, destroying roads leading to the Shifa facility, which has sheltered Palestinians fleeing Israeli bombardment, but Israel says the hospital sits above underground Hamas bunkers used as military command posts. Click here to read the story. 2 million people equals 100 trucks, World Food Programme needs more access. By Roy Ward. The World Food Programme hopes to bring 40 trucks of food into Gaza today, but has warned it needs to send many more trucks to feed all those who are going hungry. WFP Country Director for Palestine Samer Abdul-Jabbar told CNN on Sunday his group needed more access via the border crossings to bring food to those who need it. An Egyptian Red Crescent member prepares an aid convoy truck to cross the Rafah border from the Egyptian side on October 21. Credit, Getty Images. We have to also note that that's not enough compared to what is already needed at the moment. We need more that, Abdul-Jabbar told CNN. To be able to feed 1 million people, we need 40 trucks a day. If we're going to be supporting 2 million people, we need 100 trucks of food. But of course you know that those trucks are going to include other commodities that are essentially on the ground like food, water and medical supplies. He added that the communication blackout yesterday prevented the WFP from arranging the latest shipment as they couldn't reach staff in the country. Those communications only returned in recent hours. He said not all his staff have yet to be accounted for. Yesterday was a major challenge for all of us because of the blackout that happened with the communication, Abdul-Jabbar told CNN. We couldn't coordinate on the ground to facilitate for the trucks to go, and luckily today it's going to be coming back. But after they just have no communication on the ground, with our staff, with our partners, even just to plan for the crossing and the shipment of the trucks was a major challenge. That is something that shows how vulnerable the whole situation is. Something as simple as communication is not provided for us to be able to operate. Advertisement. Imam Council calls out government after UN abstention. By Roy Ward. The Australian National Imams Council has called on the Australian government to meet with their community to explain why it abstained from voting in a UN general resolution calling for an immediate humanitarian truce between Israel and Hamas. The government said the resolution was incomplete, as it didn't announce Hamas for its attack on Israel on October 7, but this has angered a number of groups. We urgently call upon the Australian government to meet with our community and account for its abstention and do its utmost to prevent the further massacre of innocent Palestinian lives and indiscriminate bombing of mosques, churches, homes, hospitals and shelters, the ANIM said in a statement on Sunday. What is occurring in Palestine impacts all of us as human beings, as people with conscience. It is beyond culture, religion, and race. We also call upon our brothers and sisters in faith, organisations with a commitment to human rights and justice, and all Australians to join with us in taking a stand against the atrocities being committed by the Israeli Defence Force against a captive civilian population. Free Palestine banner hangs briefly at A-League men's game. By Roy Ward. Updated, a Free Palestine banner was unfurled briefly at the A-League men's soccer match between Melbourne Victory and Newcastle Jets at Amy Park in Melbourne this evening. Journalist David Milner tweeted a photo of the banner which he said was only showing for a short time. He wasn't sure why it had come down. Stadium officials have been known to take down politically sensitive banners in many Australian venues and sports leagues. This masthead has asked the Victory if it knows why the banner came down. Earlier in the day, an estimated crowd of 10,000 people marched in a pro-Palestine rally. Israel strikes near Gaza's largest hospital after accusing Hamas of using it as a base. Deir al-Balah, Gaza Strip. Israeli warplanes carried out airstrikes early on Sunday near Gaza's largest hospital, which is packed with patients and tens of thousands of Palestinians seeking shelter. Israel has said Gaza's militant Hamas rulers have a command post under the hospital, without providing much evidence. The strikes came a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a second stage in Israel's war on Hamas, 3 weeks after Hamas launched a brutal incursion into Israel on October 7. Palestinians carry an injured man out of the destruction following Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City on Friday. Credit, app. Ground forces pushed into Gaza over the weekend as Israel pounded the territory from air, land and sea. The bombardment, described by Gaza residents as the most intense of the war, knocked out most communications in the territory late on Friday, largely cutting off the besieged enclave's 2.3 million people from the world. Communications were restored to many people in Gaza early on Sunday, according to local telecoms companies, internet access advocacy group netblocks.org and confirmation on the ground. Residents said the latest airstrikes destroyed most of the roads leading to Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, which is part of the northern half of the besieged territory, which Israel has told people to evacuate. Israel says most residents have fled to the south, but hundreds of thousands remain in the north, in part because Israel has also bombarded targets in so-called safe zones. Tens of thousands are sheltering in Shifa, which is also packed with patients wounded in strikes. Reaching the hospital has become increasingly difficult, Mahmoud al-Sawa, who is sheltering in the hospital, said over the phone. It seems they want to cut off the area. Another Gaza City resident, Abdullah Syed, said the Israeli bombing over the past 2 days was the most violent and intense since the war started. The Israeli military had no immediate comment when asked about reports of strikes near Shifa. The army recently released computer-generated images showing what it said were Hamas installations in and around Shifa Hospital, as well as interrogations of captured Hamas fighters who might have been speaking under duress. Israel has made similar claims before, but has not substantiated them. Little is known about Hamas tunnels and other infrastructure, and the claims could not be independently verified. Hamas government dismissed the allegations as lies and said they were a precursor for striking this facility. On Saturday, the Israeli military released grainy images showing tank columns moving slowly in open areas of Gaza, apparently near the border, and said warplanes had bombed dozens of Hamas tunnels and underground bunkers. The escalation ratcheted up domestic pressure on Israel's government to secure the release of some 230 hostages seized in the October 7 rampage, when Hamas fighters stormed from Gaza into nearby Israeli towns and gunned down civilians and soldiers. Desperate family members met Netanyahu on Saturday and expressed support for an exchange for Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. Hamas top leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, said the Palestinian militant groups are ready immediately to release all hostages if Israel releases all of the thousands of Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, an Israeli military spokesman, dismissed the offer as psychological terror. App. Advertisement. Opinion. What would a crushing victory actually look like for Netanyahu? By Mick Ryan. In a speech overnight, as Israel expanded its Gaza operation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described how his job is to lead the state of Israel and the people to a crushing victory over our enemies. Victory is an important concept in our understanding of war, but at the same time can be very difficult to define. Kian O'Driscoll writes in his book Victory, The Triumph and Tragedy of Just War, it can be hard to pin down exactly what victory means in practical terms. Although we know it stands for winning, what this means in practice is anyone's guess. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for a crushing victory over our enemies, credit, via app. The meaning of victory depends on the objectives that underpin that success. For Netanyahu, his definition of victory is rooted in the destruction of Hamas, and the return of the hostages taken by Hamas on October 7. These are appropriate objectives given the atrocious behavior of Hamas. It is an organization that has long engaged in aggression towards Israel, and its founding documents have called for the destruction of Israel. In this regard, Hamas is no different from the Nazis, who sought to exterminate the Jewish people. No one of good character or common sense could begrudge the Israelis for wishing to destroy Hamas. Click here to read the full article. Most viewed in world. Advertisement. The Sydney Morning Herald. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, RSS. Copyright 2023.